Hey, good evening.
Howdy, howdy.
Good to see you.
Good to see you,
How
sir.
long has it been? Like 10 minutes? Yeah,
I'm
we got
broadcasting from the ALF studios tonight.
that's right. In the nurturing biosphere of the mothership. Well, I see Viviana was edged out
Barely.
and barely edged out there, but it's good to see you guys. So it's looking like it's going to rain. Is it going to rain? I
It's
wouldn't be at
it's
all
sprinkled on me
disappointed.
a bit.
It'd be great. I would love it.
That's what's supposed to be bringing a little bit of the cold weather. We're not getting the low in the 50s like we were promised by the lying weathermen, but or women. I don't know, whatever they are, weather
Well,
people.
I talked to truck driver Jimmy, who was up in Wyoming,
Hmm.
and he was forced to park his truck due to snow and wind. And he called me because he said, "Hey, man, I asked you to send me some warm weather." I said, "I'm not sending you jack squat because I asked you to send me some snow and colder weather, and you hogged it all.
Yeah, we didn't
Because
get
you
any
can
of it.
have all of it you want." I said, "Well, send it.
You can truck it down.
Yeah, just truck it on down, put it in the back of the truck, and bring it with you." So, oh man, so yeah. But it's been a good day, and it's going to be a good evening. We've got a special guest with us tonight, and we
He's
could
he,
certainly play the "Can you guess who it is?" Um, but I don't think they could. I think that there would be a real stretch if someone could guess who our special guest is tonight.
he's
So
he's in the green room.
he's in
He's
the green
getting
room
getting
enjoying
taken
some
care of.
snacks, and I will say this: it'll be a first time guest with us, so that's kind of exciting. A potential. I'm not no pressure, just potential discipleship university facilitator, maybe. You know, so
Let's get him through. Let's get him through this before we start signing him up for other stuff.
well, you know. Yeah, I'm trying to dump in the next segment, right? I'm, I'm hoping 2021. Could it be worse? I
Yeah.
don't know. So, but it's been a good week. We've gotten some good things, and looking forward to this Sunday. I've got a special message for us this Sunday. I will not begin the Samson study this Sunday. It will be a week from Sunday, Lord willing. But I have a very timely, special message for the church this Sunday morning, and I hope you'll plan to be here for that. And our preparations for Back to Church Sunday are going well. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, yeah. We got
Yeah.
some traction. Where there's a lot of work going into it behind the scenes. We have a lot of really good people that are signing up, volunteering, and helping out. So if there's something, if you're interested in helping out with anything for Back to Church Sunday or beyond, just let us know. There's plenty of opportunities to serve the Lord and His church going on. So just let us know.
So that's awesome. So I'm looking forward to it. I know folks are wrestling with things, but coming back to in-person corporate worship is very important for our personal health and things. And
If we could just get a good preacher, we'd be good. We'd be good to
man,
go.
if you could just get a trained monkey to juggle some balls, it would uptick that portion of our ministry. Um, so,
You might be selling yourself a little short there.
well, undersell, over deliver. Yeah.
It's a
Hopefully, I
secret.
can I can come in over a juggling monkey.
Well, I mean, at least consistently. I mean, after a Sunday, I think the juggling monkey probably get a little
Yeah,
old.
the juggling monkey would probably get a little old. I mean,
I
I don't think he
mean,
could ever work his way up to running chainsaws or something. So,
that's true. The
but
liability, their insurance would
yeah,
not be happy.
no, no, Church Mutual would definitely not be down with that. So, well, all right, guys and gals, we've got a special guest, so we're going to rearrange the schedule here just a scotch so we can use maximum time for our roundtable discussion on the road to risk with Jesus. So, Josh,
Yep.
how about you start us off?
I'm gonna turn this down so don't blow it out. I'm gonna take these out, and then we're gonna get going. We're gonna do a couple songs, and then Jimmy will come back on and our special guest. So this first one's one you should know. It's called Cannons. It's skies like cannons in the night, while the music of the universe plays, and we're singing, you are holy, great and mighty. The moon and the stars declare who you are, and I'm so unworthy, but still you love me forever. My heart will sing of how great you are. Beautiful and free, the song of galaxies, reaching far beyond the Milky Way. Let's join in with the sound. Come on, let's sing it out as the music of the universe plays. And we're singing, you are holy, great and mighty. The moon and the stars declare who you are, and I'm so unworthy, but still you love me forever. My heart will sing of how great, and all glory, honor, power is yours. Amen. And all glory, honor, power is yours. Amen. And all glory, honor, power is yours forever. Amen. And we're singing, you are holy, great and mighty. The moon and the stars declare who you are, and I'm so unworthy, but still you love me forever. My heart will sing of how great. We're singing, you are holy, great and mighty. The moon and the stars declare who you are, and I'm so unworthy, but still you love me forever. My heart will sing of how great you are. All right, there's Cannons. This next one, actually by the same guy, funny enough. I didn't realize that when I picked him. But yet another really good Phil Wickham song. And this one is called Beautiful. I see your face in every sunrise. The colors of the morning are inside your eyes. The world awakens in the light of the day, and I look up to the sky and say, you're beautiful. Whoa. And I see your power in the moonlit nights, where planets are in motion and galaxies are bright. We are amazed in the light of the stars. It's all proclaiming who you are. You're beautiful. Whoa. And whoa. sitting on your heavenly throne. Soon we will be coming home. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. When we arrive at eternity's shore, where death is just a memory and tears are no more, we'll enter in as the wedding bells ring. Your bride will come together and we'll sing. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. All right, back at you.
All right. Well, thank you, Joshua. Well, like I said, tonight I wanted to kind of take a different tact on this very familiar passage of Scripture, and would love to hear some personal experience. So the point that I really want to dance around tonight is this, is to be a Christian and to follow Christ has an inherent risk involved. And so we're going to talk about risk and the walk up to risk in the Christian life, because oftentimes people want deep water faith, but they're not going to build up the faith that they don't drown. And so I wanted to invite someone on who has a very deep understanding of this particular passage of Scripture, and who also at one turn in his life, and many others, but one significantly I'm thinking of tonight, walked up to a large, difficult risk in his personal life and in his married life and his professional life, and he stepped out of the boat just like Peter did, and God has blessed him. And so I wanted to invite in our good friend, Brother Jay Sykes. Good evening to you, brother.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
It's good to see you.
I appreciate it.
You staying dry? We've got lightning here. I don't see rain, but we've got lightning.
No, it's raining here.
All right.
Yeah, it's the first time in years it rained in Caddo and didn't rain somewhere else.
I know. Well, you finally repented, So.
Yeah. And I said, Lord, and remember my brother Jimmy.
That's right.
He needs a little forgiveness too.
Twice the mantle. Well, Jay, like I said, Sunday we had one of our missionaries in, and he did a tremendous job taking us to the encounter. Just to kind of refresh everyone who may be not real familiar, Jesus had fed the 5,000, and they had dispersed, and Jesus wanted to go and pray. He tells his disciples, "Get in the boat, and I'll meet up with you." They get out into the Sea of Galilee, and a storm rushed upon them, and they were scared. They feared for their lives. Trained fishermen were scared, and all points in between. And while there, they see a person on the water that at first glance they mistake to be a ghost. And then Peter makes an incredible statement. Jesus, if that's truly you, tell me to come to where you are. And we know the rest of the story, as it were. So what I want to talk about tonight and kind of just banty around with is the risk involved with being a Christian. The risk of being faithful to the Lord and trusting him in things. So, Josh, you had some really great thoughts earlier. You want to touch on those a little bit?
Well, it makes me think whenever we talk about risk in the Christian life, it makes me think about there's a really cool philosopher who had a really cool name. His name was Soren Kierkegaard. I like to say his name whenever possible, and he was.
Can you spell it?
I can. Yeah, I probably actually can. Now I don't know the names for the funky like the O with the line through it. I don't know the technical names, but I can probably spell it. Yeah, exactly. But he was an existentialist, and if you've ever heard of Nietzsche, then he was like the Christian, kind of contrast to him. But anyway, one of his kind of ideas that he talked about was this idea of leap of faith. So there's a lot of pressure sometimes from the world to, hey, you should be able to exactly point to all the evidence that you have for why you're a Christian. It should be some kind of like logical mathematical formula. You should have this preponderance of evidence that's like convinced you rationally that Christ is the right choice and all this kind of stuff. And what Kierkegaard taught was, he said, listen, at the end of the day, we all have to make a leap of faith. We all have to jump from a place where we're sure to a place where there's a hope, or it's a leap of faith. And not only Christians do this, but we all do this every time we get in our cars. Now, it might be a small leap there, but if you're getting in your car to go to your job, there's a small leap, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to get into a car wreck or what's going to happen, but you understand that the risk is very small compared to the reward of being able to pay for electricity and air conditioning and all those kinds of things. And with faith, it's similar. We take a leap of faith, and there is a risk, but compare the risk of faith to the ultimate reward, right? To the reward of Jesus, to the reward of heaven. So in comparison, yes, it is a leap, but at the same point in time, the risk to reward ratio there, as you might say, is huge. The reward of Christ and heaven and all those is far surpassing any kind of risk we might have to deal with on earth. So that was just kind of an opening thought on that.
So, Jay, let me ask you, I know you're familiar with the passage. What do you think the greatest barrier to risk-taking in the name of Christ might be?
The greatest? Say that again, Jimmy.
What would you feel the greatest barrier to risk-taking for Christ may be?
Failure?
Fear of failure?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Fear of what others might say.
Yeah.
Now,
You know,
which one do we fear most? The unbelievers or the believers?
Probably. No, I understand what you're saying, but in my case, it was probably the unbelievers,
Okay.
because they knew who I was,
Right.
where the believers, they don't have all the garbage, so to speak.
Right.
And so, to take a stand for Christ is, there's risk of ridicule and people telling you you're phony and, whatever the case may be. But when you walk it out long enough, there was one particular lady who would make the comment, and she made it at church one time in front of the whole church, that, if God can change Jay Sykes, God can change anybody.
I see.
But first, do what?
She said, with all due respect.
Yeah. But, it didn't happen, overnight. And I had to take that stand to risk any ridicule in order to move forward with Christ, to get to the point to ultimately jump out of the boat, I think is as to what you're referring to in my life tonight.
So what I see is in this particular encounter, there's a process by which there's a walk up to this risk.
Yes.
There's a lot of things in life we have to build up to, whether it's getting married or you build up your courage and these things. Well, so first I see fellowship. Christ had already called Peter out of one boat.
Right.
To follow him. So there has to be a fellowship. You're not going to walk up to a big risk unless you're following Christ. That's faithfully, diligently, day by day. Second is being with him. Peter had just seen Jesus do the feeding of the 5,000. So he's not just following, but he's with him. That means actively involved in what God is doing. And then Peter had to obey him. Jesus said, get in the boat. Now, we all know that Jesus knew what was coming. Peter didn't. And in my sanctified imagination, I assume it didn't look like the world was about to end in calamity as they're climbing into the boat. That's my assumption, right? And so you have to obey him. You have to follow. You have to be with. You have to obey. And then lastly, you have to call out to him, but you also have to be willing to listen to his call out. So there is a significant walk up to this big risk because, like you were saying, Jay, Peter was running. This was a big matzo ball of risk for Peter. Mm-hmm. If this goes poorly, what are some of the risks that Peter was taking here, Josh? What are some of the risks Peter you see taking at this point?
Well, I remember the last time I taught on this, one of the things that stuck out to me was that Peter, as someone who had grown up on that lake, was very comfortable in that boat. I mean, that boat to him was as comfortable as, anything to us. I'm trying to think. If you're a cowboy, that's your horse. You know what I mean? He's a fisherman. That's his boat. So he's supremely comfortable on that lake, even in the storm, as long as he's on that boat. So when it got to the point, to the actual thinking of stepping out, one of the risks for Peter is that he asks the Lord to call him. Remember, he says, "Hey, Lord, if that's you, call me out." And the Lord doesn't call him. That's one thing, is he stands out. Another thing is that, he gets out there, he immediately sinks, and he gets known as the fisherman who drowns in the Sea of Galilee because he stepped out of the boat in the middle of a storm.
The stories, the gossip. Oh, yeah. Stupid Peter, what was he thinking?
He's a 30-something-year-old man who's the oldest one, we think, of all those apostles probably. He's married. He's the only one who's married. And, yeah, if he's known as the guy who steps out of the boat to chase after a ghost and drowns in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, then that's, there's a big risk to his pride and his reputation and his authority to the rest of the apostles. There's a lot of risks.
So, Jay, what do you think was the primer for Peter to be asked this? I don't know if you've ever been around attorneys. They always tell you this: don't ask the question you don't want the answer to.
Right.
See, they don't understand that in horror movies. You don't look into a door if you don't want to know what's behind the door. And so here's Peter, and in the midst of this mess, and he asks a question that you may not want the answer to, right? So why do you think Peter would ask such a question at a time like this?
Well, first off, I think, as Josh was mentioning, the boat was his comfort place. And so I think that, he had seen what Jesus has done before. And so as he's looking to, what was your question again, Jimmy?
Why would Peter ask this question at this time?
Why would Peter ask Jesus if it's really him to call him out on? Like, what made him think about even stepping on the water to begin with?
Yeah.
Because of what Jesus had done for him before. But then he says, as he says, "Don't be afraid, it is I." Well, I believe he really wanted it to be Jesus. He wanted to believe that. And you got to remember, as comfortable as he was out on the Sea of the Galilee in his boat, and he had seen storms before, but for them to be, this petrified, this had to be a storm among storms.
Right.
And so he wanted it to be Jesus, and I believe he was willing to ask Jesus because he so much wanted it to be Jesus. And even though in the disciples' lives, many a times they would forget what they had seen Jesus do before, and it showed in their lack of faith.
Now, wait a minute, Jay. Christians don't forget what Jesus has done in the past.
Okay, it's time for me to sign out because I don't agree with that. I think that's a huge problem with Christians.
Yeah.
Well, we can have
each one of us,
prayer life and a short memory.
Do what?
We can have a long prayer life and a short memory.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is, remember what Jesus has done for us. And I believe that had a lot to do with Peter, even though there's a lot of times, the faith is lacking because you don't remember at that moment. my memory is very selective these days. And but ultimately, I know enough. But I believe Jesus or Peter was just willing enough to say, "Call me out there," because he wanted it to be Jesus, and he believed that Jesus would do what he said. As far
Josh,
as, do not worry, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Josh, how does Peter get to a risk it all moment? I mean, this truly is a risk it all moment, because if he misunderstands, if he misinterprets, if he misidentifies, this is an all-in move.
Well, I think for Peter, it might be a little easier because he is already all in. He had already left his job. He had already left his family. He had already committed to following Jesus. He probably, maybe more than the other apostles, given his age, might have understood some of the risks involved. You know, for Peter, once you're all in to Jesus already, stepping out on the water is a little bit easier because there's nothing behind you. He's got nothing else to turn to. Jesus is the one he's following through all this stuff. So if that's not Jesus, or if Jesus doesn't keep him afloat, then that's who he's relying on anyway. So for I think sometimes it can be more difficult for us than it might be for Peter, because we've got all that stuff we're not willing to give up, kind of weighing us down, holding us back, sticking us to the boat, whereas Peter's already all in for Jesus. And so when there's nothing behind you and there's nothing holding you back, it's a little easier to step out in that water, I think.
Well, it's interesting is I agree. He had reached a point of all in, and some of it by choice, probably the majority of it by choice, but part of it too could be from circumstances.
Sure.
He may be thinking, this boat isn't going to hack it, so I need to step out, right?
Right.
But what's interesting, and I think what's important for us as believers to be reminded is we can go to an all-in moment, but still have a time in our lives where we fall back a little bit, because we do know that later on, Peter will deny Jesus 3 times. So just
not
because
perfect.
you have an all-in moment doesn't mean that you're going to be all in every day for the rest of your life. An all-in moment is a walked-up-to experience, but we also need to strive to go from faith to faith.
Right.
And that's an intentionality. Now, Jay, you had an all-in moment in your life.
I did.
For those that don't know, Jay, I think it's fair, as I say, I was a practicing sinner before I met Christ, and I think you practiced a little bit too.
As a pro.
But you met your bride, you met Jesus, and Jesus did what Jesus do, and you sensed a call to ministry, and you begin to walk in that calling in student ministry. So give me the walk up to the big decision. What did you do walking up to that big decision we were talking about before airtime?
Well, first off, let me just back up, because I had a thought a while ago, and then I'll probably ask you to tell me the question again. But I wanted to say this while ago. I had this thought. Peter was all in when he got out of the boat, and you were saying that that doesn't mean you're all in from there on out, everything's good. And we see that in the fact that Peter was all in when he got out of the boat, but Peter's all in didn't last very long.
Right.
If he was all in, he still would have been focused on Jesus and standing on that water.
Right.
But instead, he took his eyes off. And so it's a process. We go all in. We have to continue all in. Mm-hmm. We have to spend that time and what have you. Right. But back to your question about me, what built up to that? First off, I've had the worst marriage, and I've had the best marriage, and I've got the best marriage. But year 6 was turmoil, and it was but by the grace of God that brought it. I knew what I had to do, and that was to become the spiritual leader I had not been. And in doing that, a dear friend of mine taught me the most important thing is to have a daily quiet time. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. And as I did that, I was at church with my family. Every time the doors opened, God just began to continue to work in our life. And so for 3.5, 4 years, I felt the tugging to go into the ministry. But, I had one of these fast-paced college degree plans. And, in 2 years, I had junior status, but I graduated in 12. And so I finally graduated, and now it's like, Lord, I finally got this college degree. I'm doing good. And, why would you call me to walk away from that? And so I struggled with that. But then again, as I continued to spend time with God, to serve God, He continued to work on me. And man, I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was at my bed before I went to work, kneeling down there, and finally I just raised my arms up in there, and I said, "All right, God, whatever you want, I'll do it." And so that took me into bivocational ministry. But I was, and that was a step. And with bivocational ministry, I was still making my income. Plus, I was making, a bivocational youth minister income.
Now,
And
for those who may not be familiar with that term, bivocational means that you have a secular job as well as a job with a local church. Now, did you volunteer before you went bivocational?
Yes. You're talking about in the church? Absolutely.
Yeah, you serve for free is what I'm trying to ask you.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did. We plugged in November of 91, and by I think it was July of 92, Susan and I were the directors of the young married adult department. And we did that several years, and then we went into teaching 3rd and 4th grade boys. And that we were teaching them.
Which are about the same as young married adults.
Yeah. And so anyway, we that's what we were doing on a voluntary basis when we surrendered to ministry.
And so how did you go from volunteering at your home church out to your first church of ministry position?
Well, I had talked to my pastor when I held my hands up there and said, "All right, God, whatever you want me to do." First thing I did was go and talk to my pastor and said, "What do I do?" And he had known me. I'd been ordained a deacon in the church, and had prayer time. My son and I had prayer time with him every Sunday morning from the first day he came, just the three of us before the early service. And so he knew I was legit, and that I had trusted the Lord. And he said, "Well, first thing we need you to do, you need to make a public profession that you are called to vocational ministry, and then we'll get you in the pulpit and let you preach before the church." And
now that's fun, isn't it?
That is, but I will say it was one of the most amazing things I've ever done, because it's almost like an out-of-body experience, because I knew it wasn't me. It's like watching and saying, "Who is that cat? That ain't Jay Sykes," because it was the Spirit, man. And I preached for 21 minutes, first message. That's unusual.
There you go. Yeah.
But
you dumped the whole trailer
or
on
he preached. Yeah, let me just say he preached. But, and then, of course, I was voted to be licensed by the church. And then, it was a couple months went by, and then it was like, "God, did I hear you right? Did you call me to ministry?" And, that very day when I got home from work, I had 2 voicemails on the answering machine. And it was the pastor. I ended up becoming the part-time youth minister under this pastor. And it was, God showed me that day. And so that just, and still, there was a risk of what people thought and taking a stand for the Lord. I'll never forget it. We had an Easter powwow, so to speak, covered dish thing at my secular job. And I brought like a 3-pound hammer and 3 probably 10-inch spikes, and I laid them on the table as kind of as a centerpiece. And, people were like, "What's this for?" And, and that was heartbreaking, that people, were having a pre-Easter meal and they don't know what the spikes and the nails for. But anyway, that was, people saw the change. They didn't think it was for real at first, but the change prevailed. I didn't become perfect, don't get me wrong, but anyway, and that led to the point where he called me to full-time ministry.
Okay. And so there's a big decision coming for you.
Big decision.
I believe it's an amazing thing because Jay, you and I, Josh shared with me earlier, he knew ministry of some sort. He didn't necessarily foresee staff ministry, but he had a sense of purpose and intention. At what age was it, Josh?
14.
Yeah, at 14, he decided he was going to Bible college. What a show off.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But, it's really quite amazing how the Lord uses the walk up to risk. Now, Josh, kind of like your first risk step was to go to the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, I remember I was working at Chick-fil-A, and I was going to school, and I had a friend of mine who's actually had been a youth pastor in town came into Chick-fil-A to get coupons that we were giving away for him to use in this program, and I asked him a little bit about it, and he talked to me about it, and he was telling me what it was like, and he asked me to volunteer for it, and at first I was like, well, I've got my responsibilities at church. I'm going to school full time. I'm working to try and put my way through school, all this. But then I kind of heard, a voice basically telling me, hey, listen, you can get an experience. You want to work with kids in ministry. Here's an opportunity to work with kids that need help, kids that you probably maybe never dealt with. I grew up homeschooled, all that kind of stuff. So I said, all right, I'll do it. And I started volunteering. Yeah, I wound up working 8 years and going from volunteer to the director of operations there. And it was one of the and what's crazy about that is that I had left Chick-fil-A and I was trying to find something else, and it didn't work out. And I went back to Chick-fil-A, and I remember going back to Chick-fil-A thinking to myself, why, God, do you want me to go back to this place? Not because it was bad, but because it was so... it was such an easy job. There was no challenge to it. I felt like I was just wasting my time, as silly as that sounds. You have to remember I'm 18. But I thought, surely there's something else you want me to be doing. But if I hadn't been there working that cash register at that moment on that day when Mike Barron comes walking in, I would never have been, working at the Boys and Girls Club for 8 years and all the things that God did for me there. So I learned a lesson there that sometimes God has you in a place not for that place, but for the next one. But anyway, I don't want to take too much time.
So, Josh, I'm going to claim credit for that because I worked with Mike as his chaplain when he played high school football.
He's a good dude, man. He's a good dude.
He's top shelf. So, Okay, so Jay. So let me ask you, Jay. So here's where we are. You're serving bivocationally. You've earned your degree. You're in a position of authority at a local manufacturing, business, and I'm sure the pay was reasonable and all those things. And so now you're up against the question of all in or staying where you were. You had to call to pastoring and preaching. So let me ask you this: how important was the walk up to that decision? Could you have made that decision 3 years earlier? Or, how important was the walk up to that decision to give you the courage and the faith to take that step of faith, that risk leap?
It was monumental. Without the walk up, the growth to get to that point, it wouldn't have happened. I mean, I had a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old and a wife who depended on me. And, I took a 40% cut in pay. And, I had a couple people tell me, you don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And my dad, who was a religious man, but he, or let me say a relational man with the Lord. And he asked me, he said, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, it's what the Lord's calling me to do. And that was the only time he ever questioned it. And he supported me. He's one of my biggest supporters.
Yeah.
And not only that, but when I did that, it was amazing. And again, it's not because of me. If it has anything to do with me, it's the obedience, which is simply from the faith that the Lord had given me. But I saw growth in members of my family through my growth. And my dad was one of them. And, and he was already, very relational, but he went from one of those, what's this new music, to saying, if those old people would just listen to the lyrics, it's worship.
Yeah.
And, that was pretty cool to me. But yeah, it was being the leader of my house, and the provider, the primary provider, and, stepping off in that was very risky.
Yeah.
And we never missed a lick. I mean, God provided.
Amen.
But without that walk up, not happening. Not happening.
It's interesting you mentioned that, one of the things that all of us need to be regularly mindful of is our walk has influence in other people's walks. Yes. One of the real values in Peter's stepping out in the risk was for him. He was the primary recipient, obviously, but we don't really know what that did in the lives of the witnesses of this act. And Jay, people were living faith before you, and as you're maturing in your faith, and you're going from faith to faith and victory to victory, and you're walking up to this. I mean, this is a big enchilada decision.
Absolutely.
To leave this into a thing that, quite truthfully, you weren't an expert on. And we could say this because we love each other and things, but man, ministry's hard sometimes.
Absolutely.
And it can go sideways as quick as human beings can go sideways. Our livelihood, our ability to provide can go sideways.
Right.
And so to step out of 8 to 5 Monday through Friday and all those things into an entire world, into an ocean that storms can blow up on really quick, takes a great leap of faith. So let me ask you, so how did you feel after you and your bride had resolved you were going to take the risk?
Well, I felt, okay, God, this is in your hands, man. I'm trusting you.
Yeah.
And
did you have a little bit of fear?
Oh, yeah, I had fear. It wasn't like, man, I got this mastered. God's on my side. It's like, keep your eyes on God and don't look at those waves.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's because, remember, I hadn't been to seminary. Right. I've got a Bachelor of Business Administration degree. And, I'm going into this with experience of being in church life and being a bivocational youth minister.
Yeah.
And I'm not walking in where there's 7 other pastors and, a 30-person staff. I'm walking into where it's me, a part-time office worker, and a nursery worker. And so it's like, yeah, there was fear, but there was faith. And, but I mean, God had just proved himself too many times to me to know that it wasn't, it was a true calling.
So do you remember a time after the decision you said, okay, we're all in? Do you remember a time when there was just this abiding peace about it, even in the midst of the insecurity?
Oh, yeah. I mean, to pinpoint a time, I don't know that I could do that. Or my memory doesn't, I can't recall that. But I do know when I walked out of my secular job, it was an awesome feeling,
Yeah.
But, and, getting in the pulpit and everything and the love of the people, and very quickly, well, they knew me because it was the same church where I was a youth minister.
Yeah.
And that helped a lot. And I think that was part of God's grooming me, and I, that church, those people still, man, they're top notch to me. They're family.
It's interesting is you really went counterculture is when you read the experts, they'll tell us that transitioning inside a church like that is usually difficult at best because people have a hard time transitioning the way they perceive you. Mm-hmm. And so that you were able to do that was probably, yes, very beneficial, but very unlikely.
Right.
Now, Josh, you stepped out of Boys Girls Club over, full-time into ALF. Let me ask you this, was there any fear or trepidation of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that, it's funny because I remember telling myself, again, I mean, I know I'm young now, but I was even younger, 10 years ago. So I remember when I first started Bible college.
He's young.
I know.
Yeah, he's a punk.
Yeah, I'm so old now. Let's see, how old are you, Josh?
I'm 30. I'll be 31 in October. So
holy.
Yeah, so I'm young, but I'm a little wiser than I was back then because when I was 18, 19, I was going into Bible college. I remember telling myself, I'm always gonna be bivocational. I'm never gonna be full-time ministry because those guys, what if something comes along and they're forced to compromise and because that's how they're feeding their families. I never want to have to make the decision on whether to compromise or not based off of where I was getting the paycheck. So there was in the back of my head there was always this. It's gonna sound weird, but that like going full-time ministry was almost selling out a little bit, or the potential that I might have to sell out. Because what if something happens, that I'm not cool with, and I can't just go, well, I'm going to leave and I'll go, I've got this other thing going on. So there was that. I'm not sure if it was a fear, but there was on the kind of back of my mind, okay, this is really, this is it, because if this doesn't work out, then I don't know what I'm gonna do. You know what I mean? Because there was definitely that a little bit. There was also a little bit of a chastisement from God on since you never said you would ever do this, of course, I'm going to make sure that this is what happens.
As he uses the words no one ever wants to admit, God, if this doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And listen, we'll just pull the curtain back, especially when you're younger. The role of the life of a minister is unique. And unless you live it, it's hard to understand because we live literally by faith because if the people do not give, we do not eat.
All right.
And, public opinion, how that can go. And depending on your fellowship, you can live in a fishbowl, where they just watch everything you do. And, there's 5 people and they've got 7 opinions and, they hire the pastor, but they're getting, 4 other staff members, your wife and your kids, these things.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it can be extremely challenging. That being said, there's nothing on the world like it. Amen. And, I can say for me, I am older. And I look at the process and I look at the walk up and, for me, the call to ministry originally, there wasn't a large step because my world was a mess, so there wasn't a lot of risk involved. Right. And then stepping from bivocational to full-time ministry was, let's just say it wasn't all my choice. We'll leave it at that. All right. I had a choice, but it wasn't all my choice. It was a good choice. For me, my big step was ALF because, I had served in these areas. I had done these things and I had served along very godly men, incredible men. Jay, I know, when you speak, you're speaking about Riley Hamilton. A man I incredibly respect, gifted beyond gifts. And when you walk in and around and with those type of men, the natural inclination is, well, I'll never be them. And
Right.
God goes, well, I didn't make you to be them.
Right.
But it's hard to grasp that. But I am so thankful for the walk up that gave me the courage. I'm thankful for the people who gave me the courage, because the stepping out of the boat for me, there was a fine line. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. One of the men that's still here with me at ALF that was imperative to giving me part of what I needed was Jeff Phillips. To know I had a man of faith, a man who was willing to stick and stay, because he was here during the lean years and all those things. But once you step off the boat, it is the most exhilarating thing, and I think I can say very confidently among the three of us, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing. It's not all roses and steak, but the risk is worth the reward, exceedingly and abundantly more. And but let's kind of put a bow on it. Now, Josh, you're 30, and Lord willing, as long as He tarries His coming, you got a good stretch of highway out ahead of you, son. Now, Jay and I have maybe as much in the rearview mirror as we have in the front windshield. I don't know. That being said, is all three of us are called to continue the process, because the risk is ongoing. We don't know. We don't know when the next big risk may be asked of us. And the same process, the same important factors that led us up to these big steps are the things we need to continually do. And Jay, let me ask you this, kind of your closing thoughts. How important is it for the layperson, Joe church guy and Susie church gal, how important is it for them to follow this same process of continuing to walk with, alongside of, to take the risks as they come? How important is it to walk close to the Lord like that for them?
It's vitally important. I mean, bottom line is, I've said it many times before, the best place you can be is in God's will. And He calls us all to serve in one way or the other, and to spend time with Him. I mean, it's if you don't feed off Him, it's like you don't feed your body, and you got to constantly do it. But it's vitally important because, the benefits, as you were stating a while ago, there are just the blessings that couldn't be had anywhere else. And you don't have to get a paycheck,
Right.
to experience those. And I mean, I'm still ministering people. Even today, I was ministering people, and it's it's a charge.
Yeah.
I'd rather, I would hate to miss out on the blessing of serving the Lord in whatever capacity He calls us to serve.
Yeah. So, Josh, what would you say are important practices for Susie and Joe churchgoer, if they're going to walk with the Lord, they're going to follow close to Him, they're going to be prepared for those steps of risk when they come, whether they're small or large?
I want to echo, what Jay's talking about, because it is being faithful whenever the Lord has called you to. We have a culture that's kind of church shopping. You're going to go find, I like this music, or I like that pastor, I like those programs. I think you're called to a church, whether you're the pastor or you're a member. You're called, God. If God wants you in a place, God wants you in that place. And instead of looking at church as something, as just something you can get stuff out of, if God's called you to a church, He's called you to serve there in whatever reason. Maybe it's a volunteer, maybe it's not an official capacity, maybe it's just to be there as a witness, as people come in, to witness people as you go out about your day. but there's always opportunities. So I would say that the most important thing is to understand that we all started as volunteers. I mean, none of us, our first role in a church volunteering was a paycheck. None of us are doing this or did it for the money. We all know that that's not what it's for. But all of us, there is no, we believe in the priesthood of believers. We're all the same level. There might be somebody up there on the stage or playing the guitar or whatever. But in Christ's eyes, we're all priests. We're all called to minister and to serve and to be served. And so if I would encourage anything to echo kind of what Jay said is that, we always have to be ready, and we always have to be to willing to do whatever God has called us to do and to go wherever He's called us to go.
Well, that's a great point there. That is important. As spiritual leaders, pastors, the ground is level at the cross. Now the accountability is higher for us,
right?
But we're just sinners saved by grace on a pilgrim's journey, and we get the privilege. We get the privilege of being called leader.
Yeah.
And so I just this has been awesome. I think it's really important for folks to hear that we as the leaders, we have the same wrestling. We have the same process. God doesn't just download 100% faith in our lives. We walk up to risks, and we have to evaluate them, and we have to process them, and it's an amazing thing, and we all can agree that the risk is worth the taking because the rewards are out of this world. And I want to echo kind of what Jay said. I just simply can't imagine missing what I've had the privilege of enjoying. And when I look back in my life, and when you think about stepping out of that boat, it wasn't a long way to go.
Right.
When I look back in my personal, big step risk, I'm so thankful that God put in me and around me what it took for me not to rob me and Him of what He had for me. So I guess my closing statement with this is brothers and sisters, be brave. Be brave in the Lord. And I wrote this down earlier. Is failing while being faithful a failure? Is failing while being faithful a failure? And I'll simply say to this, no.
Amen.
Peter was faithful. He failed a little bit, but out of that failure, God did a lot of things.
And we're still talking about it.
And we're still talking about it all these days later. And I don't remember who to give credit to or I would. Listen, if I'm going to fail, and I will, I want to fail forward.
Amen.
I want to fail trying. I want to fail towards being faithful because He's worthy of it. And the benefit for me is obviously, and so anyway, all right. Any last thoughts, Mr. Jay Stites?
Man, I'm just glad to be a part of this. It was thoroughly enjoyed it. Didn't think I was going to be able to, but the Lord opened the door, and
it's awesome.
I'm glad that He did.
Divine appointment, sir. Divine appointment. So
there you go.
All right, man. Well, Jay, if you'll hang on in the green room, Josh is going to sing one more, and then we'll canoodle just a minute before I let you go.
All righty.
So let me just say to everyone that's with us tonight, I want to say a special word of thanks to all the folks over here in my viewing party. Thank you all for being there. I love you, and so thankful you take time to swing by. And please be safe out there. Looking forward to Sunday. We've got a great message, a special message, a very timely message. If you've ever want to see your pastor step in a bear trap, you want to come this Sunday. It's a big old bear trap made for a big old bear. So love you guys. Josh, we'll let you sing us out, and then we'll end the broadcast. Be well, be safe, enjoy the rain, and sleep well. Jay, hold on with us. All right, bud?
All righty, we'll do.
All right, I think this is a good song for what we've been talking about. It's called "Be Thou My Vision," and it's just really perfect for what we've been talking about. my vision, O Lord of my heart. Not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. In riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Now mine inheritance, now and always, thou and thou only, first in my heart. My King of heaven, my treasure thou art. And High King of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, oh bright heaven's sun. And heart of my own heart, whatever befall, can still be my vision, O ruler of all. And heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all. Good night, guys. We'll see you Sunday.